We are now heading to Texas, where a pastor is confessing to moral failing, or as we say here at the Nonprofits, just another Wednesday. Eli has the story. Hey, Eli, what say you?
Hey, Cynthia. I say in Frisco, Texas, Tony Karoda serves as the pastor for Stonebrier Community Church for over 11,000 members, or at least he did until he confessed a moral failure to the church leadership, which rendered him unfit for the cloth in the church's opinion. It is also the church's opinion that discussing the event at all is like foosball, the devil. In a letter to congregants, the church leadership urged members not to allow the devil making it worse through any one of us, end quote, highlighting, of course, that if you step one toe out of line, you will be lightly tortured, but only for eternity. This isn't the first megachurch pastor in that corner of Texas to leave their position since just the beginning of last June. And I have to say, it's nice that they're finally giving other people a chance to take advantage of all those church members. This story is from the New York Post by Alex Olivera on July 16th, 2024.
I think, Eli, the problem was that this particular pastor did not know how to shut the door to keep out the devil. Shut the door in the middle of the night.
I think we're making different references, but I like yours too.
I practice.
Are you going to break into song now, Cynthia? Is that what's happening? We're about to see right here on the Nonprofits.
If I had room, I will put in a dance, but unfortunately, I don't. We'll implore my son to come back later, and he can do it for you.
Awesome.
But guys, we actually have a discussion to do. So let's bring it on back.
Right.
And since you had the last word, Elon, I'm going to come back to you. I want to know, what are some of the potential reasons that a pastor might step down due to moral failures?
So here's like the logical chain of events that I follow backwards, basically, right? I think if he just did something that he's like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, there wouldn't be a conversation about this. Somebody, a congregant probably, caught him doing something that he shouldn't have been doing, or perhaps another, like one of the church leaders. But how I followed it was like a congregant catches him doing something he's not supposed to be doing. And he's like, well, I better come clean to like the leaders because it's going to come out, and also be like, hey, this person saw it, so everybody's going to find out. And that's why they're like trying to dissuade people from like talking about it. The other thought I had is the only reason he would like, maybe not the only reason, but another reason that he would go straight to them and be like, they're also involved. This, like, as the article mentions, like there's 3 other megachurch pastors in the area, in like the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Tony Evans, Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship in the beginning of June. A week after that, Mike Buster of Prestonwood Baptist Church, he denied any wrongdoing. Tony Evans, he said he committed no crime but failed to use righteous judgment. And then Robert Morris of Gateway Church, 4 days after Mike Buster stepped down amid allegations of long-term sexual abuse of a minor, lasting a very long time, beginning when she was 12 years old. So it reeks of cover-up, and it seems like the church is saying, well, we don't want to hear any rumors about what happened. It's not rumors. Somebody knows, and the news is going to spread, and they're using eternal threats to terrify people into protecting this guy's reputation.
Well, I know that you're particularly saying that, there's some type of cover up, some type of conspiracy theory that's happening. But, I think that Scott said that another perspective could be another burger. Burger.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to be fair here, from one perspective, this is just nothing. This is a nothing burger, right? This is nothing really interesting here.
That's the word that I was trying to say is nothing burger. And
nothing burger. Right there.
Right there. Yeah.
Churches are private organizations, and they can hire and fire, within legal limits of whoever they want. Right. And we don't know what happened, and we don't know if it was illegal or harmful. We know that religious moral codes can be rather obscure and separate separated and departed from what we would normally consider to be a moral activity. And so leaving for moral condition, for immoral reasons could be, or a moral failing, could be something rather benign. And so I just want to make sure that we don't jump to conclusions here. However, on the other hand, there's a big but here. There's a big but. On the other hand, there is a history here of this type of thing happening. There's a history here of this type of thing being covered up. It's very common that, like, for example, why did they expose so much as much as they did? Why did they say as much as they did? Very commonly we'll see things like they'll say that the person left to spend time with their family, or their path of God has led them elsewhere. There were lots of more benign ways of describing this. Why would they give as much detail as they did? They didn't give a ton of detail, but they did, imply that something negative or something untoward was happening here. And so we can wonder why they did that, as long as we make sure that we're clear, that we're not leveling any accusations and things like that. But we also can look at, well, why pull out the big guns, right? They said, and this is a quote from the letter, it says, "And please guard against the devil any foothold for more damage to our church through unnecessary speech and speculation. This is a sad day, and we don't want the devil making it worse through any one of use in these days ahead." And so, like I said, that's the big guns, right? If they're saying, if you do something like this, or if you talk about this, or if you spread these words, you're doing the devil's work. That's a heavy hit. That's a heavy hit to a religious congregation. And so, why it seems like a pretty strong reaction if it was a benign action. They're equating they're equating talking about the issue with actions of the devil, and that's as serious as you can get. If you're one of us, you have to behave this way. If you're not one of us, you'll behave differently. And so, we need to guard against jumping to conclusions. I think it's fair for us to indulge in a little bit of conjecture here, based off of building off of this history of much worse things happening. As long as we kind of take those two things in equal measure.
Mm-hmm. Well, to your point, the moral failing, if we're going to conjecture, could be that the pastor all of a sudden aligns with left-wing values and he's woke.
Yeah, definitely.
That could definitely be a thing. Yes. And he could possibly support DEI hires. Perish the thought.
Right, we wouldn't want that.
No, never in a million years. But Jonathan, I'm coming to you because you actually happen to see a pattern going on with some pastors in Texas. Do you not?
Yeah, I do. I'm just the mega churches apparently, and I don't, and just my bias, I don't have a lot of respect for mega churches. To me, there's really just money-making machines for a bunch of con men. But they had 4 resignations in a 32-day period in Texas, with nothing but a vague reference to misconduct in one for pedophilia. These guys speak for their God, all right. I wish these were isolated incidents, but it's not the only Baptist or Protestant churches. It's everybody has these incidences, and they almost always involve children. Now, this, again, as Scott said, no jumping to conclusions here. He could have just simply, got caught picking his nose, and that was a moral failing, but that's not what I think.
Maybe he has a crushed testicle and he's no longer allowed near the altar. Maybe that's it.
Yeah, it could be. There's all sorts of ridiculous moral failings that some of these very evangelical, devout Bible. Maybe he failed to inform the congregation that he had a disobedient child and didn't stone them. Could be all sorts of things. But the whole idea that this many, there might, and I'm not being thinking there's a conspiracy. I think it's just endemic in the culture of these churches that people have to hide who they are. And having been somebody who did that for a great portion of my life, I know how much pressure that develops. Eventually, it breaks out. They have that non-kosher ice cream. They have that forbidden piece of cake, or they do something more severe that in this particular environment is going to mean you're gone, buddy. We can't have that example for our masses, and they're all huge masses. One of those congregations is over 100,000 people. Imagine that. That's bigger than most cities, small cities. So, it's like, that's a lot bigger than the town I'm in and the surrounding towns put together. So when you think about this seems to be happening to a certain section, a certain subset of the pastors, and they all have mega churches. Or is that a bias that was in the reporting? The smaller churches we probably don't hear about. And I'm beginning to think that was probably a bias in how the news cycle goes. In other words, a mega church with all these people in it, something happens and it's big news for the town because almost everybody's a member of that church. But for the smaller churches, the chapel on the side maybe had their guy do something really nasty and nobody hears about it because it's just not a big deal. It's on the police blotter for that week and fades out of the memory. So I just think that's what we have to be looking at as well. But what is going on here? I can't say, but there's something going on here. They think they're invulnerable and they're doing stuff they shouldn't and they're getting caught.
Well,
oh dear.
To your point, oh dear indeed, there is this particular moral code that Christians are supposedly supposed to live by. And I know that like all of us here are secular, all of us here are atheists and have been confronted in some ways or another about, well, where do you get your morals from? And, we have different answers for that. However, when you are a person that believes in God and believes that God happens to be the way, the truth, the life, and you're supposed to follow all of the words that happens to be in his book, a lot of times those words can be antithetical to how one is naturally. So a lot of times that happens to be the case. And you find yourself, and I know, I believe that all of us at one time were some form of Christian, that we would start to fight our cognitive dissonance because naturally we are one way, but the book says that we need to be in another way. And I believe because we've covered stories like this, some pastor did some shitty thing and now everybody's up in arms. And to your point, Jonathan, the mega pastor is just more visible. So they get talked about more when something happens.
Exactly.
It's instead of your Tom Brown church on the corner in the neighborhood where only, a few blocks may be familiar with whoever the angel of the house is there, right? But it's not that a mega church would make this moral failing better or worse. It just means that that's where that moral failing happened. But I want to know, Eli, I'm coming to you. What do you think a role would be of watchdog groups like watchkeep.org? And how would it play in holding church leadership accountable for their actions?
So this whole this story, like Tony Camarota's resignation, basically reminded me of the practice we see in the Catholic Church all the time to just relocate somebody who did something. Or in plenty of other churches, it's okay, well, we'll kind of remove you from the spotlight until the person is 12 years older than they are now or something, and they forget about it, which isn't going to happen, but that's how they think. And so they put them right back in front of you. And having these watchdogs groups that would watchdog.org is intended to have the list of all the background checks of all the clergy that have complied to a background check. Having something like that to say this person has been convicted of these things, then you can decide if you want your family to be around and learning from those people. And the families that may be affected by, let's say something untowards did take place in Tony Camarota's place, which I appreciate the three of you making it clear, it's important not to speculate or make assumptions or conject about crimes. But let's say something untowards did take place and it affects some of the people in the congregation. having had that knowledge beforehand could have, protected those families or, whoever may have been affected from that trauma or that experience had they been armed beforehand with the knowledge to make a more informed decision.
Yeah, I think that when we think about keeping church leadership accountable, I think that far too often, especially like in mega churches, it's very dictatorial. I love saying that word like on every nonprofits, and I'm just getting better at it every time that I say it, even though I say it slow. Yay me! Regardless, there's this hierarchy that's there, and whatever say ye the pastor, that's what goes, and you can't question it because the pastor almost serves like a proxy to God, just like the Pope does in the Catholic Church. I know it was very much so like that when I was in church. And it makes it very difficult for the people who has the butt in the pew to be that watchdog to say like, hey, pastor, you shouldn't do that. Hey, pastor, you need to be more vigilant on how your actions occur. But like they said, well, they will tell you that old adage that's in the Bible, touch not my anointed and do my prophets no harm. That's just a good way just to tell you to shut the fuck up. And that should not be the case.
Yeah.
That should not be the case. But, Scott, I'm going to come to you because I want to know from you, how do you think, because I touched on it a little bit more, but, expand on it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think religious teachings about sin, forgiveness, and redemption come into play in situations involving pastoral moral failures?
Well, for one thing, it's hard for us to really tell because there's such a lack of transparency. I mean, we're not being shared the proper information, the complete information, and maybe we deserve to be shared. Maybe we deserve to know that, and maybe we don't. But I think that, that lack of transparency and the lack of desire for transparency, you were mentioning some quotes from the Bible there that basically instruct the congregation to just go along with whatever the leadership says to do. And so, from their perspective, they're fulfilling their end of the bargain. They're doing what they're supposed to do. They're doing, their side of the deal. They're submitting to the church, to their God, and they consider that to be a good thing. And I think whether it's being intentionally taken advantage of or whether it's inadvertently being taken advantage of, I think it is being taken advantage of. I mean, we talk about how we have so many of these stories happening, and very often we do that. Some of the details do come out, whether that be improper sexual advancements, whether that be some kind of financial theft, or any of a variety of ways that church leadership could be taking advantage of the situation. And so I think that it's something that's part of the concept of religion itself, that idea of don't question, just do. And by bowing in obedience to the church leadership, they see that as a way of honoring their God. And so that kind of feeds into that. Now, is that going to attract predators? Yes, it's going to. Is that going to encourage people who maybe wouldn't be a predator otherwise to kind of lean in that direction? Possibly. And so it's just a risky situation. It's a unfounded trust put on people that are human beings and that are, we're atheists. We don't think that they're envoys of God or being, the avatar or representative of God, or however you want to describe it, however you want to put a label on that. They're just people. And so we should expect them to have normal, everyday shortcomings. And it's the religion that clouds that. It's the religion. It's the act of having something that's sacred like that, and that cannot be questioned, and that cannot be addressed. It's almost inevitable. It's hard to imagine that it wouldn't happen.
I hear that. And Eli, I'm coming to you for the last word, since you went ahead and brought this story to our attention. If you were able to sit in front of the governing body of Tony Karoda's church and was able to give them some advice on how they can develop better policies and procedures to actually address moral failings of their leaders, what would you tell them?
I mean, It would depend, I guess, on sort of the nature of what types of moral failings they're experiencing, or moral failures they're experiencing. If it's, I mean, is this a church code moral failing? Like, well, then, I mean, that's just what you think is moral. There's not, I mean, you can change that, but you probably won't. We can talk about it, but I probably won't change your mind. I think in the instances where maybe not this particular instance, but where crimes have taken place or have alleged to be taken place, to actually report those to the appropriate authorities and get the victims of those crimes, if there is one present in the congregation, support, and actually like address it, rather than the vague descriptions of, you know, somebody did something bad, but you better not talk about it, and just kind of moving on.
Well, you know, the resignation of Pastor Tony Karoda and the subsequent handling of the situation by the Stonebrier Community Church serves as a reminder of how the importance of transparency and accountability in leadership. And by fostering an environment of open dialogue and critical inquiry, communities can better address ethical breaches, support those who are affected, and work towards a more just and equitable society. And on a side note, moral failings is a so subjective, such a subjective term. And if we're going to be objective about what a failing is, first, let's start by allowing people to be who they are. If you, dear viewer, want to find out more about who we are, just click the link below and watch more nonprofits.